Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sports Performance Podcast. And everybody is here. Dr. Steph, how are you doing?
Fantastic.
Dr. Nick, holas.
Hi, Internet.
He's waving. This episode is being filmed as well. So he waved at the camera and not at the mic. Well done. Dr. Marisa, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Today we are going to master the push-up. How do we do that? We've done the pull-up. How do we master the push-up? Dr. Marisa, how do you do that?
Start small
Ooh,
and then get bigger.
that's like the
Great
simplistic,
Great
most
advice.
simplistic way to break out. Just drop the mic and we're done. All right, so end of podcast. Why are push-ups so difficult? We did the pull-ups and that's tough. And the other day, I want to shout these two out. We did strict pull-ups, the most you can do for one time without letting go of the bar. And Dr. Marissa did like 14. How many did you do?
No, I don't think it was 14.
It was up there. It was like 47.
53.
53.
Dr. Nick, you got 17?
Yes.
17. I think I got like 2.
Chris, you
Hey,
got
Liar.
like 30.
right now I'm at 6.
6. Nicely done. Which are not
Pre-pregnancy
easy.
I was 10.
Ooh.
Now push-ups. Push-ups are a different story, right? We're
Yeah.
pushing,
Yeah.
not pulling. In theory, those should be easier.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because
But
you're
why
not
are so-
using your whole body weight, right? You get to support some of it with your feet.
Touche.
Oh.
So they should be easier.
Yes.
Correct.
You would think, but they're kind of not. And I think
Wait, but let's talk about that point because you just said a mind-blowing statement. When you do a push-up,
Yeah.
what percent, and I don't know what the exact math on this, what percent are you actually pushing up because your feet are supported? You're in a tripod position.
yeah, I don't know. What
Is it safe to say 50%?
At least, right?
Yeah.
Right, at least-
Yeah.
Assuming midline is belly button?
Yeah, so when you do the
Yeah.
push-up, you're only pushing 50% of your body weight at the very least, maybe up.
Something like that.
depending
yeah,
on
it's
how
like
top
it's a
heavy you are.
triangle, so there's some like complex math involved, but yeah.
You guys don't understand how mind-blowing this is.
Some geometry.
It is geometry. So when you do a push-up, it's a certain percent of your body weight. That's why they're easier. That's like one of the easiest ways to look at that.
Yeah.
You also use your pecs, which are massive.
For some people, yeah.
Lats are more massive.
But it's harder to pull. It's like the same thing with friction. It's easier to push than to pull.
I also think that push-ups are things that we do a lot throughout our lifetime.
Ooh,
Not everyone
true.
Yeah.
does.
Get off
Yeah.
the ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 100% of that. I agree.
True. But also, I think that they're kind of hard. The push-ups are hard because you're starting from a shoulder stretched position. So your pec is all the way stretched out when you're way down at the bottom.
Yep.
Your tricep is all the way stretched out when it's all bent. And so when you just don't have that sweet spot of max muscle power at the bottom of a push-up. You get there like midway. So once you're like halfway through the push-up, the rest of it's easy.
That's
But I think the hard part is the very bottom, trying to get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that depends upon where you want to finish your push-up at.
Sure.
Or-
That's true.
Whether you locked it
Because
out or...
when I was
Yeah.
growing up, like a chest to ground wasn't a thing.
Oh.
Yet
Oh.
now
That's how they do it in Reno.
It completely is.
Ooh.
Yeah, hand release is now the big thing.
Hand
Yeah.
release is the new
Yeah.
push-up.
New push-up. So they are difficult, like we said, for so many reasons. But you're right. I think another big piece is you're right. You naturally we push away from things much more than we pull to. Right,
Yeah.
getting off the ground as kids, infants, and toddlers as they get off the ground, they move. They're naturally pressing. They're not pulling themselves up to a bar. Rarely.
Yeah.
Right. So I agree. So for a lot of people who it's very difficult for, what are ways to work towards either your first push-up or your 100th push-up?
Ooh. So I like to work more. So first, I would like to work the elevated hands push-up. So a lot of people will start on their knees, but I think that it's a greater challenge and a more applicable challenge to control your whole body. So I prefer to start people with elevating their hands, whether that's up on a box, whether that's up on like a bench or something like that, because then they get used to controlling their whole body instead of just from their knees to their
I understand.
hands.
Table push-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not reducing weight. You're changing the degree of difficulty.
Well, it does reduce weight because of the vectors, but yes.
Oh, you're too much of a physicist. So what I was trying to say was, because I really like the idea that you're on your toes. I like
So
that.
there's
being
more
right
weight
into
through your
it.
feet
Yeah,
when you
you're
are
just shifting
higher
it.
up. Yes, you've got more weight through your feet
This
and
is
less
like-
through your
Guys
chest.
are underappreciating how like big this is to me. So when you're basically saying put your hands on a bench or a high surface
Yeah.
so you can do the push-ups, or like on a wall,
Kitchen counter.
kitchen counter,
Ooh,
but
kitchen counter.
instead of doing on your knees.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I like that to start.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, it makes sense.
After
'Cause
surgery, that's where I'll start people if they want to start getting back into push-ups again.
you start on like a wall,
A wall or the kitchen counter.
and then down to the ground on their knees.
Mhm.
And then do you guys progress eccentrics, concentrics, and for you listeners, it just means going down is eccentric, which is tough, and pushing up is concentric, which is a little bit more natural for a lot of us because we naturally do that. Lowering part is definitely takes a lot more resistance. Do you guys progress that at all into your algorithm of how you progress push-ups?
Oh yeah.
Tell me.
So once someone has a push-up,
Yep.
if they're going to do a set of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8,
Yep.
and their form starts to get sloppy, I'll make sure that they're eccentric.
Yep.
The lower down looks perfect,
Yes.
and the up can get a little sloppy
Okay.
if that's where they're gonna get sloppy.
Got it.
But eccentric has to be perfect.
Dr. Nick, what do you think?
I've never implemented that.
So I ask because I actually start with eccentrics. So I know it sounds weird.
Ooh, okay.
So I start with just the lowering phase, and then they can kind of worm it back up and
Okay.
push themselves back up. So you can start feet on the ground,
Mhm.
like a normal push-up position,
Elbow straight.
elbow straight, lower down, slow, like 3 to 5 seconds. Bend your knees, and then worm your way back up, restart, and lower.
What are the benefits to that, Dr. Chris?
I think, one, it goes with the fact that you're learning how to control your own body weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're actually lowering it. I think that eccentric, you have a lot more strength. So even somebody who can't do a push-up,
Mm-hmm.
most people can lower themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot push themselves back up. So it allows them to gain a little bit more strength before they start just focusing on the pure press. Now it does put a little bit more stress through your shoulders, a little more demanding.
Sure.
But I do like that for gaining strength in somebody who doesn't have it yet to be able to do push-ups. So I do eccentrics. I do like the wall to table to lowering, but the eccentric portion to me is something that I've implemented and it works pretty well. All genders, all sizes, and a little bit of everything. So what do you got?
I actually have another modification that I'd like to bring up.
I didn't even know there was another one. Tell me.
So for pregnant
Ooh.
women,
Ooh.
Yes.
this is one that I learned
Yes.
using the parallettes.
What does that mean?
Nice.
Usually
nice.
they're white PVC
PVC.
Okay. Yeah.
material, and you can actually grab a pair of those.
Uh-huh.
But they're usually a foot maybe off the ground.
I think you saw those in like commercial too, like if people have pain with their wrists.
Yeah.
You know, like they're kind of like
that
stands.
kind of allowed me to get into that hands to shoulder
Yeah.
position while my belly was still off the ground.
Yeah. I
So fun
understand.
fact, push-ups require a lot of core stability as well that you don't realize
Yeah.
until you become pregnant.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that is also another reason why it's hard. So the knees and different
Yeah.
things to help with the
Yeah.
core stability as well.
That's huge. Okay, so that's so simple. Basically, if you imagine they're like ring bar, or people who don't know what parallettes are, how would you describe those?
Google it.
Rails on the ground.
Rails.
Rails on the ground, yeah.
Rails.
Small rails, like skating rails, except they're just small. Sorry, that wasn't the best question. Small rails.
Small rails.
That you can use. So basically, it just helps out with your wrists, and then also takes stress off of the shoulders and allows you to get deeper into that push-up.
Mhm.
It's basically like removing the ground.
Yeah.
You can go deeper.
Yeah.
underneath it. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go right into hand positioning and elbow position. Dr. Nick, how does hand or elbow position affect a push-up, and where would you start?
It depends upon the client probably or who it is, but bringing your elbows, or I usually generally tend to go hands underneath shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
You can go wider, that's
Yep.
a little bit more pec dominant, hand underneath your shoulders and elbows to rib cages,
Yep.
more tricep dominant.
Yeah.
It's just-
They're hard. the ones close, it depends where your strength is, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're strong shoulders and strong pecs, you can go wide all day. Do certain tests or agencies, like say like somebody's doing like a military test or a police academy test, are there certain guidelines, like what's the normal, what's the standard?
Ooh, I don't
Does anyone know that?
I don't know.
I don't know about military.
Yeah, I would imagine it's like underneath your shoulders and kind of 45 degrees elbow position out to the side.
Be surprised if they were specific about it.
Oh, okay, so just accomplish the task, right?
Yeah.
So if you do your
You're
hands,
chosen.
right, whatever your poison is. So if your hands come in narrow, I don't do well with those. My triceps aren't very strong. They're like T-Rex push-ups, you know? It's basically what it is. And so if somebody is having difficulty with push-ups, would you, I guess there is no answer on that, right? It's all about
I think
preference.
it just depends where they're comfortable at.
Yeah.
So start wide or start narrow if that's harder. Go a little wider. Go a little wider. Go a little wider. Somewhere you'll find somewhere in between there.
Whatever feels natural
for you. Yeah.
Yep.
And I believe you should probably train in all of those ranges as well.
Absolutely.
Because of life.
Variety. Yes.
Yeah. I would say that for people that are having shoulder pain though, and they're sensitive to being in this really wide
Just
position,
Yes.
I usually have them start somewhere between 45 at the elbow and 0. So between rib cage and 45 degrees out to the
So if
side.
you're coming down to a push-up with your elbows out to the side, that's really close to an impingement position for the shoulder. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's just a specific
pinch point.
Yeah, pinch point in the shoulder where people have shoulder pain. So this is a very
It can
pinchy
be,
position.
it can be proactive
So
for sure.
elbows by your sides are probably the safest place for the shoulder, but
I'd agree with that. And so for you listeners out there, all Dr. Steph was doing was bringing her elbows up to kind of 90 degrees or in line with your shoulders. And that is painful on the shoulder. And so if you have pain with push-ups, bringing them in narrow might be a little bit of a little help. Dr. Steph is actually really good at the narrow ones because when she pushes me, when she's angry, it's more of the close, narrow, large push, kind of like a lineman. She's actually very, very strong. What about shoulder blade position? The push-up we think as a shoulder-based, like a pec or a shoulder-dominant movement, but we forget it's all connected. What does a shoulder blade have to do with a push-up? I don't believe this. Dr. Marissa, what do you got?
Yeah, so the shoulder blade is really the only way that your arm is connected to your body for the most part. So
that's mind-blowing. That's good for a lot of people. I think that's huge.
Yeah, so your arm bone is connected to your shoulder blade. It's not connected to your rib cage at all. So
Beautifully
that shoulder
said.
blade is just the way that you can produce force with your body out to your arm and from your arm back to the rest of your body. But I think when it comes to shoulder blade position, we've got the ideal ones that we're always preached. So when we're sinking into the push-up, having your shoulder blades, pinch back and together versus when we're at the top, pulling them apart and spreading them super wide. I think some people though don't do well with that, and so I think it's if you can play around with your shoulder position if you have pain and try to figure out what shoulder blade position works best for you, then you can try that.
Is it okay I've seen this before where people have like the shoulder blades like sunken or their body's like sunken into their body, or it just doesn't look like they're stable, they're just kind of like flimsy. Do you want a set shoulder blade, meaning do you want your shoulders strong and sturdy before you do the lift, or does it really matter?
I think you can develop stronger and sturdier shoulders through working on your push-up positions and just working on your plank holds, kind of playing around with how far away from each other your shoulder blades are. But I think it's a good way to train shoulder stability and strength.
Side note, what about shoulder taps? Is that a thing? Can you progress push-ups with shoulder taps? Is that
Ooh, sure, why not?
Yeah.
That's like the very fundamental, right? Like at the very beginning. If you guys don't know what those are, shoulder taps are if you were in a plank position, knees off the ground, hips in the air, and remove one hand from the ground and touch the opposite shoulder with it and switch. And what that does is requires a lot of stability on one side of the arm that's down on the ground. And so if your push-ups are weak because your shoulders are not strong, that might be a fundamental kind of basic thing that we start with. And typically we do those with people who are after surgery or a significant shoulder injury enough that they're starting from the ground up, literally. So, what else? Anything else in the shoulder blade position, guys? Anything that you would add in? Lock that thing down.
Yeah, I found that if people have issues with like a separated shoulder, that they do better with shoulder blades pushing them as far apart as you can at the top, just to get a little bit more activation through the shoulder blade before they start to descend.
Just a little push-up plus.
The little plus I found with separated shoulders, that helped. They feels better.
Yeah, agreed.
That way.
Okay, so going off of that, let's talk about, we've touched on it. Let's summarize with, what about pain? Is it okay to do it? Out of all these modifications, what would you recommend? How do you structure it? Do you go away from it? Do you push into it? Let's start with some guidelines. Dr. Ann, that's a very vague question, but a lot of listeners, we've got a lot of listeners out there who have shoulder pain, and they're like, I want to be able to get more push-ups, and there's such variation, right? They might have the itis. You know what the itis is, the inflammation. They might have an AC separation. They might have internal impingement. They might have a torn rotator cuff. They might have all these variations, but what do you guys recommend? Dr. Nick, what do you got? Let's start somewhere.
Oh, it always goes back to it depends.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's always a variation of a push-up that they can do with pain. That said, I wouldn't want it to push anybody through a significant amount of pain.
Yeah.
So, I like modifications. You can change hands internal or external
Yep.
rotator, fingers pointed in,
That's
fingers
a good
pointed
point.
out. You can change hand position wider, narrower. You can go lighter as in go up the wall or
Yep.
bench or whatever, your
Yep.
knees. You can usually find a push-up variation that'll keep you strong in the push-up and
Yep.
that you'll be able to work at.
I think this, because that's the hardest part, is that maybe you've been working on push-ups, or you've been trying to get your path to 10, right?
Sure.
And 1 week you push too hard and that shoulder's bugging you and you don't want to go back to 0. So I agree with you, Dr. Nick. I think that you don't have to just discontinue them, because I think there's still hope in maintaining that strength. But that's where I think working with medical professionals or fitness professionals who know progressions can help you, instead of we say this every day, movement is medicine. You just got to go.
Yeah.
You got to be able to push around it. Don't go through pain, but just maybe knock on the door and then continue training. So
I like that, yeah.
Knock on the door.
Yeah.
you knock on the door of it. Don't go through it. And I think that's
And push-ups,
huge.
I think, is one that you don't want to push through.
Yeah, they're tough. They're really hard it's easy to compensate, and there's so much stress going through the shoulders. Not a lot of other body parts taking force. So that's the benefit of doing push-ups, because they're so isolated and you can make progress. But there's not a lot of room for error. And when you do that, your body takes a toll, and it'll let you know.
And this movement is needed for most daily
Life.
things.
Yeah,
You
for sure.
need your arms to be able to wash your hair and to be able to prepare and eat your food. You need your shoulders, so you don't want to overdo it.
Yeah, very rarely do we say, discontinue, and this is not one that you discontinue. You just got to find a way around it. Like Dr. Nick said, that your arms wider, narrower, and then playing with where your fingers orient. You point your fingers in is usually going to give you more pain, because it's turning the arm in or elbow out, and then turning the fingers out will be a little bit more sturdy and less stress across the shoulders. And then maybe you have to go to a wall or go to a bench, a higher surface that doesn't require so much torque on the shoulder demand. But if you have pain with them on the floor, you might have to move your way up, right? Dr. Steph?
Yeah.
What else? What are the modifications you got?
Ooh.
Those are the mains.
Those are the main ones.
Yeah. So, those are all.
Ooh, you want to make it harder?
Let's see.
Push-ups on rings.
Oh my goodness! Now we're going the other direction. These are
You wanna make it
aggressive. These are aggressive. So tell me what those are.
So basically, if you have a healthy shoulder, it's pain-free to do a push-up.
Okay, so now we're moving away from pain.
We're moving away from pain.
In performance.
And we're like, okay, so how can I challenge myself a little bit more?
Yep.
Make the surface unstable,
Okay.
right? Throw in some rings. So basically, bring the rings as close to the floor as you can.
Yep.
And hold on to them there. and now you have this unstable surface that you're going to try to do a push-up on.
You can do those with a TRX too.
Absolutely.
Right? So we're just saying
100%,
like a suspension system type of a deal. You're doing a push-up but basically raised off the ground 2
Sure.
inches, 3 inches, and on an unsteady surface. So these are definitely challenging things. I haven't learned to do them yet. I'm still trying. They're very, very challenging. So these are all great modifications for the push-up to be able to master it, work around it, modify it, and get around shoulder pain. But we hope you enjoy these tips. So on behalf of the Sports Performance team, we'll see you guys next week.
Adios.